They thought the night would finish him, that the venom would do what chains and whips had not, and that by morning the field would be quiet again. But history does not always obey the plans of cruel men. The boy's name was Isaiah, though on the plantation they rarely used it. Names, they believed, gave people weight, and weight could turn into resistance. Isaiah was 14, narrow-shouldered, with feet calloused into a permanent map of the cotton rows. He moved through the fields like a shadow that knew where every thorn waited, where the ground dipped, where the snakes hid from the sun. He had learned those things because learning them kept him alive. On that day, the heat lay heavy over the land, thick as breath held too long. The cicadas screamed from the trees as if warning anyone who would listen that something was wrong with the world. Isaiah had been sent to the far edge of the fields, past where the overseer usually bothered to look. A fallen fence needed mending, and the men were busy elsewhere. He was small enough, they said, quick enough. He worked with wire cutting into his fingers, sweat running down his spine, his stomach hollow from the thin corn mush of dawn. The ground near the fence was damp and dark, shaded by low brush that the sun never quite reached. He felt it before he saw it, a sudden pressure, sharp and electric, like fire pressed into flesh. The snake struck his ankle and was gone in the same heartbeat, sliding back into the brush with a whisper that sounded almost polite. Isaiah staggered, the world tilting, his breath stolen by pain so immediate it erased thought. When he looked down, 2 small punctures bloomed red against his skin. The pain spread fast, hot and crawling, racing up his leg as if something alive was moving inside him. He tried to shout, but his voice came out thin. He tore a strip from his shirt with shaking hands, wrapping it tight above the bite the way the older men had once whispered you should. His vision blurred. The cicadas grew louder. By the time the overseer noticed him collapsing near the fence, Isaiah could no longer stand. They carried him back not with urgency, but with annoyance, his body slung between them like broken equipment. The plantation owner was summoned, a man whose boots never touched mud unless he chose. He looked at the swelling ankle, at the boy's skin already turning a strange, sickly color. Someone said the word snake. Someone else said it was a bad one. There was talk of cost, of doctors who charged money, of time lost from the fields. The owner's face hardened into a decision that felt rehearsed. Leave him, he said. If he lives, he lives. If he doesn't, the ground will take him. They dragged Isaiah to an old storage shed near the edge of the property, a place that smelled of rot and rust. They laid him on the dirt floor and shut the door. The darkness swallowed him whole. Outside, the plantation continued to breathe, to move, to pretend nothing had happened. Time became something thick and sticky inside Isaiah's mind. The pain came in waves, crashing through him, then pulling back just enough to let him feel the fear. His leg throbbed, swollen so tight it felt as though it might split. His mouth went dry. He thought of his mother, sold south years ago, her face already fading at the edges of his memory. He thought of the river he had once seen beyond the fields, shining like freedom even though he knew better than to believe it meant escape. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. He could not tell. Night crept in, bringing cooler air that did nothing to soothe the fire under his skin. Somewhere nearby, other enslaved workers whispered his name. No one dared open the shed. Punishment waited for those who disobeyed. Still, a girl no older than Isaiah crept close enough to slide a gourd of water under the door. He drank until his stomach cramped, grateful beyond words for the small mercy. The venom worked its way through him, slow and deliberate. His heart raced, then faltered. His thoughts drifted in strange circles. He saw things that were not there. Fields without fences, hands reaching for him from light he could not step into. His breathing grew shallow. He pressed his face into the dirt, trying to stay awake because he felt, somehow, that sleep would be the end. Above him, the sky filled with stars he could not see. The plantation slept. In the big house, candles were blown out one by one, confidence settling in that the problem in the shed would solve itself by morning. Isaiah lay alone, a boy left to die not because he had done wrong, but because his life had been weighed and found inconvenient. And yet, as the night deepened in the 10th hour since the bite crept closer, something inside Isaiah refused to let go. His body shook with fever, but his heart still beat, stubborn and uneven. In the darkness, He whispered a prayer he had learned from an old man who believed God could hear even from the bottom of the world. The pain did not stop. The fear did not leave. But somewhere between breaths, between the edge of consciousness and the pull of silence, Isaiah felt a strange shift, as if the night itself were holding its breath. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the horizon, the shed was still closed, the boy still unmoving inside. Anyone passing by would have sworn the story was already over. But the plantation had not yet seen what 10 hours of darkness had failed to take, and what the coming light was about to reveal. Morning arrived without ceremony, pale light leaking across the plantation as if unsure it belonged there. The roosters cried, the fields exhaled dew, and the world resumed its routines with the quiet confidence that nothing had changed overnight. Men and women were already being driven from their quarters toward the rows, eyes down, bodies aching, minds braced for another day of measured suffering. No one spoke of the shed. No one expected it to matter anymore. The overseer reached it just after sunrise, more out of habit than concern. He kicked at the door with the toe of his boot, the sound dull against the warped wood. There was no answer. He pulled the door open, already turning away, already thinking of tasks undone. Then he stopped. Isaiah was still breathing. It was not the steady breath of rest, nor the desperate gasp of a man on the edge of death. It was shallow and uneven, but unmistakably there. His eyes were open, unfocused, staring at nothing. His leg was grotesquely swollen, the skin stretched shiny and dark, but the spread had slowed. The fire that should have consumed him entirely had stalled, as if confused by his refusal to disappear. The overseer muttered a curse under his breath. Survival complicated things. Survival demanded decisions. He crouched, pressing 2 fingers to the boy's neck. A pulse answered, weak but stubborn. Isaiah flinched at the touch, a faint sound escaping his throat. That sound carried farther than it should have. It slipped into the morning air and found ears that had been listening since the night before. Whispers moved through the rows like wind through dry grass. He's alive. 10 hours. Still breathing. The words were carried without voices, passed in glances and half-turned heads. Some felt hope stir, small and dangerous. Others felt fear, because hope had a way of drawing punishment down on everyone nearby. The plantation owner arrived soon after, summoned with irritation rather than urgency. He stood in the doorway, his shadow swallowing the boy's thin body. He expected to confirm a mistake, to see the last twitch of a dying thing. Instead, he saw Isaiah's chest rise and fall. For a long moment, no one spoke. "Fetch the old woman," he finally said. They brought her from the quarters slowly, as if speed itself might be mistaken for defiance. Her name was Ruth, though she answered to whatever they called her. Her back was bent with years of labor, her hands scarred and steady. She knew roots and leaves, knew which plants soothed and which burned. She had delivered babies, eased fevers, and closed the eyes of the dead when no one else cared to. She knelt beside Isaiah without asking permission. She did not touch him at first. She watched. She listened. She smelled the air around him. Then she nodded once, a small movement that carried more certainty than any doctor's degree. She asked how long it had been. When they told her, her eyes lifted slowly, meeting the owner's gaze without challenge, without fear. "The worst should have passed," she said. "If it was going to take him, it would have already." The owner scoffed, but there was unease in it. Survival unsettled the neat order of things. Still, he waved a hand, granting her a few hours, nothing more. If the boy lived, he would return to work. If he died, the ground would still take him. Ruth worked quietly. She crushed leaves between her palms, the scent sharp and green. She mixed them with water and made Isaiah drink, little by little, coaxing his mouth open when his jaw trembled shut. She bound his leg with poultices that drew heat and poison alike, whispering words no one else was meant to hear. Isaiah drifted in and out, aware only of coolness against his skin, of hands that did not hurt him. Pain still owned him, but it had changed. It no longer felt like an enemy rushing to destroy, but something being pushed back, inch by inch. His heart steadied. His breathing deepened. By midday he slept. That should have been the end of it. A boy bitten, a boy surviving, a boy returned to the fields when his body allowed. But survival, it turned out, had a weight of its own. When Isaiah woke again, the world felt sharper. Sounds came too loud, light too bright. His leg throbbed, but it held him. Ruth was gone, sent back to work as if nothing extraordinary had happened. The overseer watched Isaiah with narrowed eyes, as though trying to decide what he was looking at now. Not a corpse. Not a problem solved. Something else. By evening, word had spread beyond the plantation. A traveling preacher passing through heard it at a well. A trader heard it over supper. An enslaved boy left to die from a snakebite had lived through the night. 10 hours. No doctor. No miracle shouted from a pulpit. Just a body that refused to follow expectations. Stories like that did not stay small. The owner felt it too, though he would never have named it. A restlessness settled into him. He ordered Isaiah moved out of sight, away from curious eyes. The boy was placed in a corner of the quarters, watched but not tended, as if attention itself might feed the strange thing growing around him. Isaiah listened from his pallet as whispers circled again, different now. Some said God had spared him for a reason. Some said the snake's venom had changed him. Children crept close just to look, then ran away laughing, half afraid. Isaiah did not understand any of it. He only knew that he was alive, and that being alive suddenly felt dangerous in a new way. Late that night, long after the plantation had gone quiet again, Isaiah felt a hand brush his shoulder. He opened his eyes to find Ruth crouched beside him, her face lined with worry rather than pride. "Stay small," she whispered. "They don't like things they can't explain." Isaiah wanted to ask what she meant. He wanted to tell her that the pain was still there, deep and pulsing, that something inside him felt different, raw and awake. But her warning lingered heavier than any answer. Outside, the night pressed in close, as if listening. By the next morning, the owner had made up his mind that Isaiah's survival was not a blessing, but a problem waiting to grow, and somewhere between the fading venom and the rising fear around him, Isaiah sensed that the danger was far from over. By the third day, Isaiah could sit up. That single fact changed everything. On a plantation built on the certainty that bodies broke when pushed hard enough, a boy who should have been buried instead straightened his back and drew breath like he intended to keep it. The swelling in his leg had begun to recede, the skin loosening its grip, the color softening from death dark to bruised life. He could not yet stand without shaking, but his eyes were clear now, alert in a way that unsettled those who noticed. The owner noticed. He stood at the edge of the quarters that morning, pretending to count heads while his attention stayed fixed on Isaiah. Survival had become inconvenient, then suspicious, and now it felt dangerous. Men like him relied on predictability. Pain followed rules. Punishment worked. Death arrived when it was supposed to. Isaiah's body had broken that agreement. "Bring him," the owner said quietly. They helped Isaiah up, hands gripping his arms harder than necessary. Each step sent pain shooting through his leg, but he did not cry out. He had learned long ago that silence could be a kind of shield. They brought him into the open yard, where sunlight revealed the truth no rumor could exaggerate. The bite marks were still there. The leg was still damaged. But the boy was alive. Fully, undeniably alive. The owner circled him slowly, as if inspecting a horse that had survived an illness it shouldn't have. He asked questions no one expected Isaiah to answer. "How did you live? What did you feel? Did you see anything in the dark?" Isaiah said nothing. He kept his eyes on the ground, heart pounding, Ruth's warning echoing in his ears. "Stay small." Silence angered the owner more than any explanation could have. He turned away sharply. "Back to work when he can walk," he said. "Until then, keep him out of sight." That was meant to end it. To fold Isaiah back into the machinery of the place. To grind the miracle down until it was nothing more than another body in the rows. But something had already shifted. The people who watched him shuffle back to the quarters did not see a problem. They saw proof. At night, they came quietly. One by one, they sat near Isaiah's pallet, close enough to feel the warmth of his living body. They asked him nothing. They did not touch his leg. They just needed to see him breathe, needed to know that the world could still surprise the men who claimed to own it. Isaiah felt their eyes on him and did not know what to do with the weight of it. Ruth came again, later than before. She checked his leg, nodded once, and pressed something small into his palm, a dried leaf, brittle and light. "For remembering," she said, "not for showing." Days passed. Isaiah learned to walk again, slowly, painfully. The fields welcomed him back without mercy. Cotton did not care about survival stories. The overseer watched him closely, waiting for weakness, for the miracle to collapse under labor. It did not. Isaiah worked with the same quiet endurance he always had, but now there was something else beneath it. Awareness. He listened differently. He noticed things he had not before. The way fear moved through the men who commanded, the way their confidence cracked when certainty failed. The story did not die. It traveled. It bent and grew, as stories do. Some said the snake had chosen the wrong boy. Some said God had marked Isaiah for something beyond the fields. The owner heard enough to make him uneasy. Unease curdled into resolve. One evening, a trader arrived with news of a sale downriver. Strong boys fetched good prices. Boys with stories fetched more. Isaiah was called from the quarters at dusk. He knew before anyone spoke. His chest tightened, but he did not resist when they bound his hands. Resistance would have been a gift to them. He walked instead, steady despite the pain, despite the fear clawing up his throat. As they led him away, he caught Ruth's eye across the yard. She did not cry. She did not reach for him. She simply pressed her fist to her chest and nodded, as if sealing something unseen between them. The river lay wide and dark under the night sky. The trader's boat rocked gently, impatient. Isaiah was placed among others, their faces hollow with fresh loss. As the ropes were cast off, the plantation receded into shadow. The place that had almost killed him, that had failed to, slipped into the past. Hours later, as the boat cut through the water, Isaiah felt the ache in his leg deepen, then settle. He closed his eyes and breathed, remembering the shed, the darkness, the certainty that he would die there. He remembered waking instead. He did not know where the river would take him. He did not know how much suffering still waited. But he knew this. Death had come for him once and left empty-handed. Years later, long after names and owners blurred together, people would still tell the story. Not always with accuracy, not always with kindness, but they would tell it. Of a boy bitten by a snake and left to die. Of 10 hours in darkness that failed to break him. Of a life that continued when it was not supposed to. History remembers kings and wars, dates carved in stone. But it also remembers moments like this, carried quietly from one voice to another. If Isaiah's story reached you tonight, if it made you pause, then he is not forgotten. And if you want more stories pulled from the shadows, stories like his, stories the world tried to bury, then stay with this channel, share this story, and help keep the forgotten alive.